EU officials often use words like modalities, implementation, and trilogue. How much is Eurospeak turning off the public? The European Commission has updated its manual on Eurojargon, suggesting plain-speaking alternatives, but the practice persists. As spring elections approach, are eurocrats losing public hearts and minds with sophisticated terminology? And how can they counter plain-speaking populists who win over stakeholders, or rather people, by talking straight in words they can understand? Hello, I'm Chris Burns, and welcome to The Network, hard talk with a matrix of newsmakers. Wired into this edition. Here in Brussels, Diego Marani, novelist and translator, author of the book Europanto. Also in Brussels, in the studio in Euronews, Dennis Abbott, European Commission spokesman for education, culture, multilingualism, and youth. And Doris Pack, chairman of the European Parliament's Culture Committee and a member of the European People's Party Group, or EPP. Welcome to all of you. A question to all of you, starting with Doris. What's your most hated Eurojargon word, and is there another word for it that you like?
I don't want to say hated, but the most ununderstandable is European semester. It's recent, it's new. I think it is a fact that the Commission has a right to look on the budget of the national countries since they name European semester. You cannot make it understandable to your electorate.
Absolutely. Dennis, what's your most hated word?
Oh, where do I begin? It's like picking your favourite film. There's so many of them. I mean, you mentioned more modalities. I don't like higher education institutions. I'd rather say university. Yeah. And I don't like valorisation either because it doesn't exist in English. But there's so many. OK, Diego, what about you?
The worst I can think of is actorness, which I read right today in a document. But there are many
Which means what? What does that mean?
Well, it is hardly to say. I think it means to realize something, to carry out something. But there are many also in my language, like implementazione, coming from awful English and becoming awful Italian.
Exactly. Dennis, why do people keep using Eurojargon?
Well, you know, in fairness, I think, you know, the EU institutions do love the jargon. They love bureaucratic languages. But in fairness, so do the governments and administrations in Paris and London. Wherever you care to go in the world, you know, bureaucrats use bureaucratic language.
But sometimes aren't they, but sometimes aren't they kind of required to use that in certain cases? Doris, what do you think?
I think sometimes it's difficult to find the right translation. So we are using wording like mission. Mission is for me a military verb, but mission is a word which is used in the European speak for everything. When we are going out, when we have an interest to look on the Balkan problems, we are looking on education problems, we go on a mission or we're having a mission. So I think it's crazy.
Okay, Diego, we talked about this earlier. What about this acquis? There's got to be another word for saying acquis, the French word.
Well, there are other solutions, but I think acquis is a very effective one. I'm not against mixture when it helps understanding. So I'm not against jargon, not against a specific language when it helps being understood. What is important is that we don't forget that Europe is a new invention, so it produces new notions, new words, and we must take into account this.
Okay, but Dennis, doesn't it start looking like a badly translated Chinese menu sometimes?
It does for anyone interested. Acquis is the EU rule book, and I never use it. I mean, part of the problem is, I think, is that a lot of the words which we use in English in the EU stem from French, and sometimes we get a mixture of the two things. And it doesn't really work. Okay, so exactly. Doris, we're here in the Brussels bubble. How do you break out of it in that case? How do you keep it from being captured by that kind of Eurojargon language?
I think you cannot escape, and I would never speak in such a language to my electorate. So you have to translate it in a normal language which you use to communicate. But as I have just listened, I think it is incredible. This English which we are using is not the English which is really English of Shakespeare or others. No. I think it is a little bit difficult that a lot of people believe that they speak a well English, but it isn't. It is a European English, and that's not correct.
Right, exactly. Diego, we got European elections coming up in the spring. How do we try to avoid using all this terminology that is turning off a lot of the public, and the populists are using other words?
Well, we can speak clearly when we have clear ideas about what we want to do with Europe, and this is a huge problem. But then again, we also must take into account that this English we are speaking today is becoming the Latin of our times, and as any international language, it is inevitable that this language is influenced by the mother tongue of all its speakers.
Okay, but sometimes, you know, why say stakeholders when you can say people or people interested in the issue? Or Dennis, there's got to be a way to use other words so you don't turn off the public, right?
There is always a way to use other words. Another one I can't bear is actors. For me, you know, an actor is Sean Connery. It's not a person or it's not an individual doing something. But of course there is always a way, and it's important we find a way, because so many people in the world use English as a first or second language. It is vital, and so much of what the Commission or the Parliament produces goes on websites, etc. It is crucial we deal with that.
Doris, a lot of members of the European Parliament are going to face some tough elections in the spring, and they're going to have to face that issue, won't they? I mean, a lot of them are going to have to change their language to take on populist challengers.
No, I don't think we should not exaggerate. This English speak is there. But I never speak like this in my constituency. We are speaking in our own language, and we are trying not to use these crazy words which are not understandable. As I mentioned, European semester. Nobody would understand. I should say the things as they are.
Explain what it is.
I should translate it what it is. And if I know what it is, I can say it in my German, even in my dialect if it is needed.
All right, Diego, do you think, I mean, how would you, if you were running for Parliament in spring, how would you take on populists who are using plain talk?
Well, I will try to speak clearly, to go to the meaning of things and to avoid jargon, but also explaining that these new notions we are developing here are, well, completely new. Europe is a revolutionary political project, and inevitably each word we use is the result of a compromise.
Yes.
And this can be explained to people.
Okay. Dennis, how do you explain it as spokesman?
Well, one of the things I would say as a spokesperson is I think it's important to use popular, not populist language, but popular language. And Winston Churchill, back in 1940, told his civil servants, you know, don't shrink from using brief language. Use conversational language. And I think that's what we need to do more of.
Okay. Doris, what do you think?
Yeah, I speak in my language, and with my understanding, I have worked on the legislation. I speak on this and explain it. It's up to us to explain our work, and we cannot use at home the same language which we are using here between each other.
Okay, but then perhaps maybe should certain jargon be expurgated, be removed from certain documents in the EU so that people can better understand what we're talking about? Diego.
Well, first of all, I think that EU officials should perfectly speak a couple of languages, and this is not always the case. And then we do not have to forget that English is just but one of our languages, that when you go to speak to people, you speak your own language. Our members of parliament in their countries speak their own native language, and as Mrs. Pack said, also dialect. So there are many levels, different levels of communication where we can improve. Again, when we have clear ideas, we also have clear words.
Dennis, do you think that eurojargon should be, that issue should be on the exam to work for the EU?
I do. I mean, I would say, though, that the European Commission does take this issue very seriously. I mean, for instance, in 2010, we launched something called the Clear Writing Campaign. And that's not just about expressing yourself clearly in English. It's, as Diego said, it's being able to express yourself clearly in any language. And that's something that the Commission is aware of and is trying to do something about.
Thanks, Dennis. That's all the time we've got for now. I'd like to thank our guests, Diego Marani, Doris Pack, and Dennis Abbott. I'm Chris Burns, and until next time, thanks for connecting with The Network.